There's a ethos, the SEAL ethos. What they say, it's a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed. How do you punch a guy with a Rolex? This one right here.
Of course. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Of course it's a G-Shock. Well, hello there, and you join us here today to talk about watch collections. But not just any watch collections, but the collections of a real-life Navy SEAL. If you're looking for a watch to take on tour, or just a watch to wear at home, you will find one at watchfinder.com to buy, sell, or trade. Well, as it happens, Tom and I, we for a few brief moments came back together again as good friends, but you know how these things go, they don't last, and it's all gone to pot. So the only way to resolve this now is to bring in the armed forces. Mr. Rob Huberty, how are you doing?
I'm having an amazing time. I'm a big fan of you guys, and it is a surreal experience to get to this. Thank you.
Surreal and also slightly disappointing, I hope, considering the general look and feel and budget of this production.
No, this is amazing. This is amazing.
Since we started showing ourselves on camera, I think the disappointment has sunk in a bit.
It was way better when I could just see your hands and I imagined what you look like.
That's what everybody's been saying.
Everybody, you should switch back to just the hands.
I am well aware I do not live up to the expectation. But there you go. It's a metaphor for life. Disappointment. Hopefully not disappointing will be our chat today because, Rob, at one time in your life, you were a Navy SEAL. How did you decide that you wanted to be a Navy SEAL?
So I think the truth is that I read too many books and I watched too many movies and comic books, and I thought that they were real. So, I was maybe a child of the 80s, and, you watch Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie and you thought that like Commando is a real thing, that somebody could go and just, do whatever that was. I read too many comic books and had a sense of like what a hero is supposed to be. Maybe I watched too many movies where Michael Biehn starred as a Navy SEAL. Or, a lot of that stuff had like a big impact on me, and like the Vietnam guys, and then the NASA program and that kind of stuff. Like I grew up on that kind of stuff, and I wanted to be Batman. I think everybody, when you're a kid, you want to be Batman. And there's no such thing as a superhero, and to me, that was like the closest thing to it. But the impetus for really to go into the SEAL teams for me was 9/11. That had a profound impact on me, and I mean that's why I wanted to serve my country. And then I grew up and going to like Catholic school and like have the ideas of both Catholic guilt and to make the world a better place. And you read books and even other stuff. Like I read like To Kill a Mockingbird, and like Atticus Finch had like a huge impact on me. And so how can I be a warrior or whatever? And make the world a better place. And, you watch Jesse the Body Ventura, you watch read Dick Marcinko books, you see Under Siege, what's his name? Steven Seagal. I don't know, like all of that stuff had an impact along with like, some of the books written by the actual guys. There was a Vietnam book, The Men with Green Faces, that was actually a fiction book that I thought was real. So all of these things, when it was time to be like, I want to serve my country, the SEAL teams seemed the obvious choice.
Well, I would like today to separate some of the fact and fiction, because being a very discretionary organization, for the most part, we all learnt about this.
Not anymore.
We all learned about the SEALs from film, or certainly what the film's portrayal was. In the UK, our military introduction really was through people like Biggles. We understood the armed forces to be a place to have long wavy scarves and goggles and stuff. A little bit different in the US. But also, you're here because you're a big watch fan. And I'm interested to know, which came first? The SEALs or the watches?
So the watches, but it was all for the same kind of reasons. So when I was a little kid, you would watch those movies and, in Commando, he's wearing a Seiko in that, isn't he? The Arnie in that, and it's cool. And then you watch all these movies. I mean, you watch James Bond, and James Bond is, the same kind of thing. Like no one has ever been James Bond. It doesn't exist. Those are like 5 separate jobs into one, but he wears a Rolex, right? And then later he wears an Omega, and all of those things. Like I thought that stuff was really cool. So I always wanted that. And when I was a little kid, I would get like swatches. Growing up in the 80s for a Christmas present or something like that, I thought they were really cool. And I felt like watches did something more, and it's I don't know. I always thought that stuff was cool, and it kind of sat with me. I was very intrigued by pilots and race car drivers and Steve McQueen and Paul Newman. All that stuff was like left an indelible mark to me at a young age. And maybe I was just brainwashed by, whatever the ideal version of a hero is, whatever it is, like that stuff started. So like, I always thought watches were really cool. And when I was a kid, I had, cheaper watches, Timex Indiglo. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. When your watch would light up, and I would wear that kind of stuff in high school. And I don't know, they were really fun. And for some reason, I have become a watch weirdo, and I watch you guys pretty much all the time. And I'm trying to be quiet about it because it's pretty bizarre. But it turns out in the military, there's a lot of other watch weirdos, and there's a huge heritage of it. And that stuff was very real. And a lot of the heroes that I had were like the Vietnam era SEALs were like the first books that I read. And when I was a kid, it was after Vietnam and what those people were and what they did and the missions they did. And it was secret and it was cool. And Rolex and Tudor are very strongly associated with the SEAL teams. There are Rolex wearing, barrel-chested freedom fighters. That was like the stereotype. And, Tom Clancy's Without Remorse. All this stuff just like perpetuates that stuff. Like my trusty Rolex by my side. And it was a knuckle buster. You'd be like, how do you punch a guy with a Rolex? And so
why would you do it?
Well, they say that in the James Bond. It was like, I could also use it as a knuckle buster. And I still don't. Is that brass knuckles? So like you wrap the watch and punch somebody with your Rolex?
That must be what he meant.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, that's what he said. Like I want in multiple books he said it, and you're just like, okay, cool. And then you see in the movies, you see Sean Connery lighting a cigarette and cool, and I don't know, all of that stuff left an indelible memory. And then like the advertising in the back of my school, we kept National Geographic stacks in the Catholic school I went to. And so you look at them and you'd see the old ads, and because they're just collected dust, and they let you look at them because they were relatively educational, really cool pictures and adventure stories, and Rolex advertising those pretty heavily. Even though it was like after my generation, I would see that there was National Geographic from like the 60s and 70s in the classroom. You'd see the Rolex ads and think, they would see that, and I'd watch Tom Selleck and Magnum PI. All that stuff is like, I don't know. It just left something on me, so I liked them.
I thought you were going to say in the back of your school they had copies of like Oracle Time and things like that, all these watch magazines for no particular reason.
Definitely not that. Definitely not that.
So, by way of an introduction to people who haven't watched any of the films or read any of the books you're talking about, why don't you tell us a few things that are true about the Navy SEALs, and perhaps some of the things that people think are true about the Navy SEALs and are actually just fiction?
So the first phrase, there's a ethos, the SEAL ethos, and what they say, it's a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed. So I'm about 5'9", and I weigh 170 pounds. So I'm not, I was small size in the SEAL teams, but you don't actually look like Batman. And I would say there's actually like a worse correlation if you do. Now guys, to get through training, it's really tough. Guys get bigger afterwards, but like while they're active duty. But I would say it is people who have a very high determination, and they're soldiers, whatever it is. We're SEALs, so it's sea, air, land. It was started by JFK officially, and he was a Navy guy, and they started the Green Berets and the SEALs, basically seeing a need. And honestly, they stole it from a lot of the Special Forces stuff was stolen from the British, from the SAS. So the SAS was like really the first, special operations kind of force that everything did. And a lot of American Special Forces are stolen from the UK.
They mentioned in training that really is about testing your determination. What is it that they do to do that, to weed out the rest? And what watch would you wear whilst doing it?
So you're not allowed to wear a watch while you do training, and quite frankly, you would destroy even a G-Shock. You would destroy doing what they do. It would be ripped. Like they just make you do exercises to the point of almost crippling. We call it getting beat, but people aren't hitting you in the face. But you do stuff like log PT. So it's basically like telephone poles that you do in a boat crew. And I would say, the reasonable amount of working out that you could do with that telephone pole would probably be like a 15-minute workout and you'd be crushed. And then they do it for 3 hours to the point where like you're bleeding, your skin chafes off. And then it's so bad that people who joined to be challenged just quit in the middle of it. And so they do that for all of basic underwater demolition / SEAL training called BUDS is about 6 months long. And it's basically just weeding people out. At some given point, it switches to training, but even while you're learning stuff, they're kind of weeding you out. And then after that, they give you the skill set. So they make you pretty tough, and you do it in Coronado, California, which is pretty much paradise. So there's a beautiful hotel that's like historically beautiful that you do a lot of the training in front of, the Hotel Del Coronado. And so like people watch you being like, why are you doing this? And so every day you'll be probably hypothermic, and every day they'll work you to basic exhaustion. And then there's a culmination exercise early on called Hell Week that being a Navy SEAL didn't live up to the thing. I wasn't on a secret mission that I could never talk about, and it's for my whole life. Hell Week's pretty close though. It's pretty bad. And then you run with a boat on your head in a team. And I would say that like the whole week, let's say it's 160 hours or whatever, I don't know. That boat's on your head for, I would say, at least 50 hours. And that's for real. Like, I think it's absurd. And like, you're pretty much catatonic by like day 2. And you have to keep going for like 4 more days.
It sounds terrible. I'll be completely honest.
Oh, it's so awesome. It's so perfect. You get to do it with friends, and at some point you're joking with people while you're doing it. It's miserable and you're delirious and you're like passing out, almost like running. It's great. I'm still friends with all the people that I did it with. I was privileged to be amongst amazing people.
I can't imagine there's too much more of a better bonding experience than bringing yourself to the brink of death with a bunch of guys. So when did the first watch marry with your Navy SEAL career?
So this one right here.
Of course. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Of course it's a G-Shock.
The Casio G-Shock. So when you're going through training, you have a class, and it starts up with ours had maybe like 350 people to start. And only 2 people would get to wear a watch of any given type. And it would just so that you were on time to the location that you went. So the officer in charge, and then the leading petty officer. So the leading enlisted person, the most senior person, the most senior officer, the only people in the whole thing to wear watches. And somewhere, once they decide that you're actually going to make it through, they would let you wear a watch. So that's somewhere maybe in 3rd phase of training, and there's periodically points where they give you like good equipment, because in order to torture you and to find your worth, they're not giving you the high-end gear. You're dealing with, basically garbage. And I would say like what they use now is probably better than what I use, right? Because I did this 20-ish years ago. But when they issued you the G-Shock, that was a humongous indicator. And this is actually the first one that I was issued. There was other ones that I wore that I broke, because when you dive and stuff like that, they would give you other G-Shocks to use that you would borrow. Mm-hmm. But so this was mine. So this is, maybe 5 months into the training cycle or something like that. Now, they would give you G-Shocks when we were going through our dive phase, but you didn't get to keep those. So those were borrowed. So our second phase is our diving phase. And so you learn to scuba, you get qualified on that. And then they take you to a pool, and they do pool comp and pool competency. And I mean, they do hit you in that. So like they hit you underwater, they hold your air. They assault you in the water. Like it's pretty extreme. So the way that I learned, my PADI or NAUI certification is a little bit different than others. It was, but when you actually go do real dives, you would get to wear like these G-Shocks, right? And it's just funny that guys, like you would see guys in town wearing them, and you could kind of determine whether someone was a SEAL or not. and there's a look. I could identify it just what people in like special operations look like. In the SEAL teams, we kind of go for a homeless chic vibe. So in the military, it's short haircuts, it's shaving every day, and in the SEAL teams, that you can't get crazy with it, but like you try to not shave or get your hair cut. So you'd see guys in town, with sleeve tattoos and a Casio G-Shock and like too much facial hair, and their hair's a little too long, but not so long, and then like you're like, I want to be that guy, and and so like you would see people wear G-Shocks or Garmin's or Suntos, and you would strive to be that person. So this was this G-Shock was worth a lot to me, and still is worth a lot to me, and I wore it for a good bit of my career too. So this is the first watch, and then when I graduated Buds or SQT, which is the next school, and they actually like pin the trident on your chest and you get to have your family show up. My parents bought me an Omega Seamaster. And so I wore that on graduation day. And that was like my first nice watch.
I was going to say the G-Shock, is that a sort of readily available like universal release, or is there anything special that denotes that one as a SEAL issued watch?
That reminds me of a funny story. So in second phase, you're supposed to turn all the watches in. One day that we lost one of these watches, and maybe somebody took it because they thought it was cool and they wanted it. No one knows where that watch went, but somebody had owned one of these in their barracks room. And if gear is missing at the end of something, we got absolutely destroyed. So I think sent you pictures of us doing like push-ups with like scuba tanks on. There's like a picture of me like just getting destroyed. And, I think we're getting jocked up, and there's like, if you play basketball, you play a game of horse, and every time you miss a shot, you get a letter. And so if you're bad in Buds in second phase, they putting your gear on, we call it getting jocked up, and JOCKUP. If you spell that out, then it's bad. They'll make you like go do like a very long run with your Drager on with like in the soft sand. Like it's terrible. You have like a bad like 3 to 5 hours in front of you. And so someone took one of these watches and we got destroyed, and then it magically reappeared because someone brought their personal watch in, and then we painted a number on the back of it that matched the number. So there's nothing special about this. Very replaceable, but this one's special to me.
Yeah, amazing.
And then I have a watch the watch that my parents gave to me, I still have. So this Seamaster, they engraved on the back of it, they put my name and my Buds class number on it. So
nice.
It's Buds class 259, the last hard Buds class. They're pretty much all a joke from then on. That's a joke in this. You always say that your Buds class is the last hard one, and everybody else is like a pretender.
Yeah. Well, they seemed like two very hard-earned watches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to queue up for hours for a swatch, didn't you, Andrew?
That's the hardest I've ever worked.
I decided that I was going to wear this as the same way that I wore the G-Shock, and so I did. How your sniper rifle shoots changes by elevation because the air is thinner. My roommate was the biggest Tiger Woods fan in the entire world, and at one point, he's just like, "Hey man, can we get a picture together?"